The Galactic Academy of Interstellar Studies had a tradition. Every third cycle, Professor Vorn Aldicus would select one planet from the restricted observation list and take his most advanced students on what he lovingly called an educational excursion. Most professors avoided the restricted list entirely. Vorn Aldicus was not most professors. Students, he announced, his 4 iridescent eyes gleaming with the kind of excitement that should have been a warning sign for everyone present. This rotation we will be visiting Sector 7, Class M planet, biological designation. He paused dramatically, letting the silence stretch like pulled taffy. Earth. The classroom went absolutely, completely, utterly silent. Then 17 alien students spoke at the exact same time. Sir, that is a Deathworld. Vorn waved his 3-fingered hand dismissively. The gesture carrying all the confidence of a being who had clearly never personally visited said Deathworld. Nonsense, nonsense. The humans have graciously opened a small observation zone near their northern continent. Perfectly safe, properly supervised, nothing to worry about. Korvac Shen, a tall, pale blue student from the Meridian cluster, slowly raised his hand. Korvac was the type of student who read every textbook twice before class and still stayed up at night worrying. He was, in other words, the smartest person in the room. Professor, Korvac said carefully, the Academy's own database rates Earth at a danger classification of 9.7 out of 10. Yes, Vorn said brightly. The maximum rating is 10. Yes, a rating of 10 is reserved for active supernovas and black hole event horizons. Correct, Korvac stared at him. And we are going, voluntarily, for science, Korvac, for science. Vorn clapped his hands together with a sharp crack. Pack your environmental suits, we leave at dawn cycle, and do try to keep up. Now let us take a moment to properly introduce the students who had the extraordinary misfortune of being enrolled in Professor Vorn Aldicus's advanced xenobiology class. There was Korvac Shen, already mentioned, the worrier, the reader, the student who sent Professor Vorn 3 separate safety memos before they even boarded the transport shuttle, all of which Vorn used as impromptu bookmarks. There was Pella Oryx, a compact 4-armed student from the Braxis system whose species communicated primarily through color shifts across their skin. She was currently a deep anxious purple, which in her culture meant something between I have a bad feeling about this and I would like to file a formal complaint with the universe. There was Duno Fass, a broad-shouldered, rust-colored being from a gas giant colony, who was almost offensively calm about everything, and had once survived a reactor leak by taking a nap and letting his body naturally filter the toxins. He was eating a snack right now and looking faintly bored. And then there was Mixie Vark, the youngest of the group, wide-eyed, endlessly curious, and possessed of the singular talent of asking questions that made everyone around her deeply uncomfortable. Do humans really eat other living organisms? Mixie asked, her large amber eyes blinking rapidly as the shuttle descended through Earth's thick, ozone-heavy atmosphere. They eat almost everything, Korvac said flatly, reading from his datapad. Plants, fungi, other animals, each other. Historically, though that practice is now considered largely frowned upon. Largely, Pella repeated, going a sickly orange. It was a different era, Korvac muttered. The shuttle broke through the cloud layer and for one brief shining moment, the student saw Earth the way every being sees it the first time. Green and blue and impossibly alive, wrapped in swirling white clouds, glowing like something that had no business being as beautiful as it was considering what lived on it. Oh, Mixie breathed. It is pretty. A lot of things that want to kill you are pretty, Duno said, chewing his snack. He was not wrong. The observation zone was set up in what the humans called a national park. Professor Vorn had arranged it through the Galactic Cultural Exchange Bureau, which had a very nice brochure and a very poor understanding of what national parks actually contained. The shuttle touched down in a clearing. The ramp descended. Warm, thick, oxygen-rich air rolled in like a wave. Every alien student immediately felt slightly dizzy. The oxygen concentration, Korvac gasped, checking his scanner, is 21%. That is almost a fifth of the entire atmosphere that is just combustible gas. Humans breathe this, Pella said, less as a question and more as a statement of disbelief. Every day without suits. Every second of every day, Vorn confirmed cheerfully, stepping down the ramp with his hands clasped behind his back. Remarkable, is it not? Their entire biochemistry runs on controlled oxidation. Essentially, they are all tiny, slow fires. Mixie stared at a nearby tree. The tree did nothing, as trees typically do, but Mixie stared at it like it might suddenly stand up and introduce itself. What are those? Trees, Vorn said. Plants, Stationary photosynthetic organisms. They look large. That one, Vorn said, gesturing to a particularly tall pine, is approximately 40 meters tall. Some species can reach over 100 meters. They live for thousands of years. Some of the oldest ones on this planet have been alive since before your home civilization discovered fire. Everyone looked at the tree with considerably more respect. Then a bird landed on a nearby branch and screamed at them. Pella turned violet. That, Vorn said serenely, is a corvid. A crow, specifically. They are among the planet's most intelligent avian species. Studies suggest they can recognize individual faces and hold grudges. It is holding a grudge right now, Mixie whispered. I can feel it. The crows screamed again, louder, and then flew away. Probably to tell other crows. Crows absolutely do that. The first real incident occurred 40 minutes into the excursion. Korvac had been carefully scanning the surrounding forest with his environmental probe, cataloging organisms with the methodical patience of someone who has already mentally written his own obituary and is simply collecting data until the inevitable. His scanner beeped. Then it beeped again. Then it beeped in rapid, frantic succession. Professor, Korvac said slowly, my scanner is detecting a large organism, approximately 200 meters to the north, massing at. He checked the reading, 430 kilograms. Everyone stopped moving. That is larger than our shuttle's cargo module, Pella said quietly. Yes, Korvac agreed. What is it? Korvac looked at his datapad. He looked at the scanner. He looked back at his datapad. It appears to be a bear. Define bear, Duno said, finally putting down his snack. An apex predator. Omnivorous. Territorial. Capable of running at speeds up to 50 kilometers per hour and climbing trees despite what its body weight would logically suggest should be physically impossible. Its claws are capable of tearing through materials rated at hardness level 6. Its bite force exceeds. Korvac stopped reading. He closed his datapad. We should go back to the shuttle. Nonsense, Vorn said. Bears are fascinating. If we are quiet and calm, it will almost certainly ignore us. Almost certainly, Pella echoed, in the flat voice of someone cataloging a final regret, as if to personally respond to Professor Vorn's optimism. The bear chose that exact moment to emerge from the tray line. It was enormous. It was brown. It had small, intelligent eyes that swept across the group of alien students with an expression that can only be described as deeply unimpressed. It sniffed the air. It tilted its massive head. Nobody breathed. The bear looked at Duno specifically, perhaps because Duno had been eating something that smelled interesting. Duno looked back at the bear with the calm energy of someone from a gas giant colony who had faced things considerably larger than this. A long, slow geological moment passed. Then the bear turned around, lost interest entirely, and walked back into the trees. You see? Vorn said brightly. Perfectly safe. My life expectancy readings just plummeted and recovered in the span of 40 seconds, Korvac said. His voice was completely level, which was somehow more alarming than if he had screamed. The second incident was worse. 2 hours into the excursion, while Professor Vorn was enthusiastically explaining the local plant life, Mixie wandered approximately 15 meters off the designated path to get a better look at what she described as a very beautiful yellow and black flying creature. Mixie, Korvac called after her. Do not touch the It is so small, Mixie said, reaching out a finger with the confidence of someone who had grown up on a planet where nothing smaller than her fist had any interest in causing her harm. It is buzzy and cute, and the wasp nest hidden under the rotting log exploded outward like a tiny, furious military operation. Mixie ran. She ran extremely fast, which was good. The wasps ran faster, which was not. The next 4 minutes were the most chaotic 4 minutes in the history of the Galactic Cultural Exchange Bureau's Earth Observation Program, which was admittedly a young program but was already developing a troubled reputation. When it was over, Mixie had 12 stings across her upper body, which in her species translated to significant inflammation and a temporary pheromone response that made her smell, according to Pella, who was now a mortified shade of pink, like a fire alarm. Wasps, Korvac read from his scanner, his voice trembling with something between awe and despair. Are you social insects? They do not die when they sting. They can sting multiple times. A single colony can contain up to 10,000 individuals. They are considered by many xenobiologists who have studied Earth to be disproportionately, almost philosophically aggressive. I noticed, Mixie said, pressing a cooling pack to her arm. The truly impressive part, Korvac continued, because he was Korvac and he could not help himself, is that they did not even need to defend their nest. They chose violence as a first response. I respect that, Duno said, watching the wasps settle back into their log. That is a strategy. By the time the group stopped for their midday rest period, the student body had collectively aged approximately 10 years in emotional experience. Pella had cycled through 8 distinct skin colors, none of them indicating positive emotions. Korvac had filled an entire datapad with safety observations, most of which began with the phrase, "Under no circumstances should any sentient being ever." Duno had eaten 2 more snacks and seemed to be genuinely enjoying himself, which everyone else found personally offensive. And Mixie, now slightly swollen but unbowed, was reading everything on her datapad about Earth's animal kingdom with the expression of someone who has found a new obsession. "Did you know," Mixie said, to no one and everyone, "that there is an animal here called a mantis shrimp that can punch with the force of a bullet fired from a ranged weapon?" "Please stop," Pella said. "It can see 17 types of color. Humans can only see 3. Please stop. There is also an animal called a tardigrade that can survive in the vacuum of space, radiation exposure, temperatures approaching absolute zero, and pressures 6 times greater than the deepest ocean trench on this planet." Everyone went quiet. "It is approximately 1 millimeter long," Mixie added. More silence. "This planet," Korvac said finally, staring at the tray line with the hollow eyes of a being that has had a fundamental shift in its understanding of the universe, "is not a death world because the big things will kill you." He paused. "It is a death world because everything on it is quietly, patiently, thoroughly ready to kill you, including the tiny things. Especially the tiny things. The humans live here," Pella said softly. "They were born here. They grew up alongside all of this." Another silence. "No wonder they are the way they are," Duno said. Nobody asked what he meant by that. They all already knew. It was late afternoon, and the amber light of Earth's single sun, a perfectly ordinary G-type star that nevertheless managed to bathe everything in a color that the students had no word for in their own languages, was cutting through the pines at a low angle. Professor Vorn sat on a flat rock, his datapad on his knee, watching his students with the quiet satisfaction of a teacher who has seen the exact moment that learning stops being academic and starts being real. Korvac sat nearby, completely still, watching a small rodent, a squirrel, move through the branches above him with a level of athletic grace that he found personally humiliating from a creature that weighed less than half a kilogram. Pella had turned a soft contemplative gold, the color her species wore when processing something too large and complex to express in any simpler shade. Mixie was on her back in the grass, staring directly up at the sky, watching birds. Every so often she whispered the name of a new one she found in her datapad, like she was collecting them, and Duno sat at the edge of the clearing watching the tree line, finishing his last snack and saying nothing. A sound drifted through the trees then. Distant, low, rhythmic, a sound that was not animal, not wind, not the million subtle mechanical hums of their equipment. Korvac checked his scanner. "There are humans approaching from the Eastern Trail, a group, approximately 8 individuals." Everyone sat up. The sound grew clearer as the humans came around the bend in the trail. They were laughing, talking loudly with no concern for the ambient noise level, no apparent awareness of the bear that had been 400 meters away less than 3 hours ago. No environmental suits, no scanners, no weapons visible. They wore light clothing. Some wore shorts, exposing their bare legs to an atmosphere rich enough in oxidants and biological particulates to cause significant cellular damage over long-term unprotected exposure. One of them was eating something while walking. They spotted the alien students and Professor Vorn. One of them, a tall human with short red hair and a worn jacket, raised a hand in a casual greeting wave, like encountering beings from other star systems on a hiking trail, was merely mildly interesting. "Hey," the human called out. "You guys on the exchange program? We heard there was a school group coming through." Professor Vorn stood and returned the wave. "Indeed, I am Professor Vorn Aldekis of the Galactic Academy. These are my students. We are conducting an observational study of your remarkable planet." The red-haired human grinned. "Cool. See anything good?" "We encountered a bear," Korvac said. He could not help it. It came out before he could stop it. Approximately 430 kilograms. It approached within visual range. The human's face lit up. "No way. Lucky. We haven't seen one all week." "Which trail?" "We're hoping to catch one near the river before sunset." Korvac stared at the human. The human stared back pleasantly. "You are," Korvac said very carefully, "hoping to find it." "Yeah. Good photo opportunity. Did you get a picture?" Korvac looked at his scanner. He looked at the human. He looked back at his scanner. He put his scanner away. He picked up his datapad and opened a new document. At the top of it, he typed 6 words. These beings should not biologically exist. He stared at those words for a moment. Then he added a 7th, respectfully. The humans waved cheerfully and continued down the trail, still laughing, still talking loudly, entirely unconcerned with the 400-kilogram predator they were actively going to look for. Pella watched them go. She was a color her species had never formally named because it had never been needed before. The closest translation was something between profound awe and the specific dread you feel when you realize the universe is stranger than any theory you have ever constructed to explain it. Part 2 tomorrow, Professor Vorn said pleasantly, folding his datapad under his arm. Get some rest, drink your fluids, and under no circumstances wander outside the shuttle perimeter after dark. He paused, and for just one moment, something knowing and ancient crossed behind his 4 bright eyes. Nighttime, he said quietly, is when Earth truly introduces itself. He walked back toward the shuttle, hands clasped behind his back, perfectly calm, the way only a being who had seen Part 2 before could possibly be. The students looked at each other. Then they all looked at the tray line. The forest looked back. Nobody slept well. This was not surprising given that the shuttle's external audio sensors had spent the entire night broadcasting a continuous, unfiltered soundtrack of what could only be described as an entire planet aggressively refusing to be quiet. There were sounds that Korvac's scanner identified as standard nocturnal biological activity, which was a very clinical way of saying that something out there had screamed like it was being turned inside out every 45 minutes with terrifying consistency. There were low, resonant calls from animals that his datapad listed as common and non-threatening, which he was beginning to suspect the datapad's author had written while sitting safely aboard an orbital station several thousand kilometers above the actual planet. There was also, at approximately the 3rd hour of the sleep cycle, a sound that none of the scanners could identify, that lasted for exactly 11 seconds, and then stopped. Nobody mentioned it out loud, but nobody had been asleep when it happened either. By the time the pale gray light of Earth's dawn came creeping through the shuttle's viewport panels, all 5 students were seated in the common area, fully dressed, environmental suits sealed, looking like soldiers who had spent a night listening to a distant battle slowly getting closer. Duno was eating breakfast. You slept, Mixie said, watching him with something between admiration and genuine biological suspicion. I did, Duno confirmed. How? He considered the question seriously. I decided the sounds were interesting rather than dangerous. Some of those sounds were dangerous, Korvac said. Sure, Duno agreed, but worrying about them did not make them less dangerous. Sleeping made me more capable of responding to them, so. He shrugged his broad, rust-colored shoulders. I slept. Korvac stared at him for a very long time. Then he opened his datapad and typed something. Then he closed it again without showing anyone what he had written. Professor Vorn appeared from the cockpit corridor with the infuriating brightness of a being that had slept magnificently and was ready to cause educational harm. Good morning, everyone. Spectacular night, was it not? I counted at least 4 distinct predator call signatures from the northern ridge, possibly a wolf pack, maybe 2, hard to say. Wolf pack, Pella said. She was already a deep, unhappy purple. She had been purple since the bear incident and had not meaningfully recovered. Canis lupus. Magnificent animals, pack hunters, extremely intelligent, capable of coordinating pursuit strategies across large terrain. They have been known to track prey for days. Vorn beamed. We might see them today if we are fortunate. I would like to formally register, Korvac said, that I do not consider that fortunate. Registered, Vorn said, clearly not writing it down anywhere. The morning excursion took the group south, toward what the park's human map labeled a scenic river overlook, a phrase that had sounded peaceful and pleasant when Vorn announced it, and was already sounding considerably less so now that the students had 24 hours of Earth experience to filter it through. The trail wound through dense forest, the light coming down in long columns between the trees, the air thick and alive with the kind of biological richness that made every breath feel like an event. Birds called from directions that made no logical spatial sense. Insects moved in the grass with small purposeful energy. Mixie was in front, her datapad out, pointing at things with barely contained excitement. She had apparently processed her WASP experience overnight, and emerged from it, not traumatized but fascinated, which the others found both admirable and faintly alarming. That plant, she said, pointing to a leafy green growth along the trail edge, is called stinging nettle. The tiny hairs on its surface inject a chemical compound on contact that causes pain, inflammation, and itching that can last for hours. Why? Pella said. Defense mechanism. The plant defends itself. Aggressively, Mixie confirmed. And that one, she pointed further, is poison ivy. Contact causes a severe allergic reaction in humans, and that one is wild parsnip. Its sap combined with sunlight causes chemical burns. Everyone took a large step toward the center of the trail. The plants, Korvac said slowly, are also trying to kill things. Everything here is trying to kill something, Mixie said, not unkindly, as if this were simply a fascinating design feature rather than an existential horror. The difference is that Earth's organisms have been trying to kill each other for approximately 4 billion years, so they have gotten extremely good at it. Duno nodded. Efficient. Terrifying, Pella said. Both, Mixie agreed cheerfully. They reached the river overlook at mid-morning, and for a few genuine minutes the universe was simply beautiful. The river below was wide and clear, moving fast over smooth stones, catching the sunlight in fragments that scattered across the surface like something alive. The valley spread out below them, green and gold and impossibly vast, the kind of view that makes even a being from another star system feel very small and very present at the same time. Pella had gone a soft, involuntary gold. She looked embarrassed about it. It is all right to find it beautiful, Korvac told her quietly. The danger does not cancel the beauty. Pella looked at him sideways. When did you become philosophical? Around 3 in the morning, during the unidentified sound. She almost smiled. The gold deepened slightly. Professor Vorn stood at the overlook railing, hands behind his back, watching his students with an expression that was warmly, specifically satisfied in the way of someone whose plan was proceeding exactly as intended. Sir, Korvac said, coming to stand beside him. You have brought students here before. It was not a question. Vorn did not treat it like one. 11 times, Vorn said, and every time, the bear, the insects, the nocturnal sounds, the plants. Every time, Vorn agreed. You could warn us more thoroughly. Vorn turned to look at him with all 4 eyes, and for the first time since the excursion began, his expression was entirely serious. Not dangerous, not unkind, but serious the way that deep water is serious. Heavy with something underneath. If I warned you thoroughly, Vorn said, you would understand it academically. You would read the numbers and note the danger classifications and file it all away as data. He looked back at the river. But you would not feel it, and feeling it is the only way to understand the humans. Korvac said nothing for a moment. The humans grew up here. Vorn continued. Every human being who has ever lived was born onto this planet, into this atmosphere, into this ecosystem that has been sharpening its teeth for 4 billion years. They did not arrive with environmental suits. They had no scanners. They had no datapad full of survival ratings. They had soft skin and no venom and no armor and no natural weapons of any particular note. He paused. And they are still here. Another pause. The river moved far below them. More than still here, Vorn said. They built cities. They wrote music. They made art about the beauty of the very things that were trying to eat them. They domesticated some of those things. They named them. They kept them in their homes. They look at a 400-kilogram predator and their first instinct is to photograph it. Korvac thought about the red-haired human from the previous afternoon. The casual wave, the easy grin, the enthusiastic desire to go find the bear. They are not reckless, Korvac said slowly, working through it as he spoke. They are calibrated. Yes, Vorn said, to a level of danger that would be the end of most other species. Yes, and because they are calibrated to that level, Korvac stopped. Everything else, Vorn finished quietly, seems manageable. The second half of the morning was going smoothly, which in retrospect should have been the first warning sign. The group had moved along the river trail, cataloging plant and animal specimens, when Mixie made the sound. Not a scream exactly. More of a sharp high intake of breath that carried the specific frequency of someone who has seen something their brain has not yet fully processed. Everyone turned. Mixie was standing completely still, about 3 meters off the trail, staring down at the ground. Mixie, Korvac said carefully. What is it? Do not move quickly, she said, in a voice that was extremely calm in the way that voices get when the brain has bypassed panic entirely and gone straight to pure crystallized focus. There is a snake. Specifically, there was a timber rattlesnake, approximately 1.5 meters long, coiled on a flat rock that Mixie had apparently nearly stepped on, currently doing the thing that timber rattlesnakes do when they feel threatened, which is rattle their tail with a dry, papery, deeply unpleasant sound that the species had developed specifically to communicate the message, I am about to make your immediate future significantly worse. Do not move, Korvac said, pulling up his scanner. It is venomous. The toxin affects the cardiovascular and nervous systems. In humans it is rarely fatal with treatment. In your species the chemical composition of the venom would. He stopped reading. Mixie, do not move. I am not moving, Mixie said. She was still staring at the snake. The snake was staring back at her. It continued to rattle. Back up, Korvac said. Slowly. Very slowly. Mixie took one slow step back. The snake rattled louder. Another step. Silence from the snake. A pause. Then the rattling slowed, then stopped. The snake held its coil for another long moment, watching her with small, ancient, entirely unimpressed eyes, and then, with the unhurried dignity of something that had been on this planet for millions of years before any spacefaring species had thought to visit, it uncoiled, slid off its rock, and disappeared into the undergrowth. Nobody moved for approximately 10 seconds after it was gone. It warned her, Pella said quietly, the realization moving across her face like a shift in light. Before it struck, it gave her a warning. They almost always do, Vorn said, from where he had remained perfectly still during the entire exchange. They do not want to waste their venom. They warn first. Pella was a color nobody in the group had a name for. It was somewhere between wonder and grief. It was fair. Most predators here are, Vorn said. They do not want conflict. They want survival. The warning, the retreat, the boundary, it is a negotiation. Earth's animals have been negotiating with each other for a very long time. Mixie finally exhaled. Then after a moment she opened her datapad and added the timber rattlesnake to what had apparently become a personal list she was maintaining titled, Things on Earth That Could Have Killed Me But Chose Not To. It was getting long. The humans from the previous day found them again near the southern trailhead, in the golden hour before the shuttle's scheduled departure. The red-haired one was there, along with a shorter human with close-cropped dark hair named, as they introduced themselves, Fen, and a taller one with a sun-weathered face who said his name was Orlas, and immediately offered Duno what he called trail mix, which Duno accepted and ate without hesitation while Korvac had a small silent breakdown nearby. So, Fen said, dropping onto a log beside Mixie with the easy comfort of someone entirely at home in a forest that had nearly killed 4 alien students in 24 hours. What did you see today? A bear, Mixie said. Wasps. Stinging plants. A rattlesnake. Nice, Fen said, entirely sincerely. Mixie looked at her. You think that is nice? That is a good day out here. Full experience. Fen tilted her head. Did anything actually get you? Mixie indicated her still slightly swollen arm from the wasp stings. Fen winced sympathetically. Wasps are the worst. Honestly, I would rather run into the bear. You would rather run into the bear, Korvac repeated. Bears are predictable. Make noise, look big, back away slow. Done. Wasps just decide they hate you personally. No negotiating with wasps. Korvac thought about this. Then he opened his datapad and added something to a document that now had 17 pages of observations. He had titled this document, Earth, a Working Theory, and the central argument, which had been evolving all day, now read as follows. Earth does not produce hard beings because it is cruel. Earth produces hard beings because it is honest. It shows you exactly what it is, from the first moment, without apology. And the beings who grow up inside that honesty learn, very early, that the universe does not soften itself for anyone. And so they do not wait for it to. They simply stand up, look at the 400-kilogram predator, and decide it is a good photo opportunity. He read it back. He added one more line. This is either the most dangerous or the most admirable quality any species can possess. Possibly both. Probably both. He saved the document. Orlas, the tall, sun-weathered human, was sitting beside Professor Vorn near the tree line, and the two of them were having the quiet, unhurried conversation of beings who have both seen enough of the universe to speak without needing to explain everything. First time? Orlas asked, looking at the students. Their first time, Vorn said. My 12th. Orlas looked at him sideways. You keep coming back. Every cycle, Vorn confirmed. I bring my best students, the ones who think they understand the universe. And then you bring them here, and then I bring them here. Orlas looked out at the trees, at the fading light, at the forest that was already beginning its evening shift change, the daytime things retreating, and the nighttime things beginning to stir in the edges. Why? Orlas asked. Vorn watched Korvac writing furiously on his datapad. He watched Mixie naming birds in the last of the light with total absorption. He watched Pella shift through a dozen colors and settle, finally on a soft, steady amber that was not a color of fear or grief or awe, but something quieter, something that had no direct translation but meant approximately, I have been changed by this and I am not sure yet what I have become, but I think it might be something better. He watched Duno finish the trail mix and looked genuinely content. Because, Vorn said slowly, the galaxy is full of species that have made themselves comfortable. We have built stations and ships and controlled environments. We have removed the variables. We have managed the risks. He paused, and we have, in doing so, very quietly, stopped being brave. Orlus said nothing. Your species never had that option, Vorn said. You could not remove the variables. The variables were the planet you lived on. So you adapted, and then you adapted again. And when something on this world developed a new way to be dangerous, you found a new way to survive it. For 4 billion years. He looked at the sky, at the first star appearing in the deepening blue, and now you are out here, among us, bringing that 4 billion years with you wherever you go. He smiled slightly. It is, honestly, a little alarming. Orlus laughed. It was a short, genuine sound, the kind of laugh that comes from recognition rather than amusement. Yeah, he said, I imagine it is. The shuttle ramp was extending when Mixie suddenly stopped walking and turned around to face the tray line one last time. The forest was dark now, properly dark, the kind of dark that has weight and texture and its own particular brand of sound. Somewhere in the distance something called out, low and long, the wolf call that Vorn had promised, and that had finally, at the very last moment of their visit, arrived. It was answered after a pause from a different direction. Then a third voice, from further away still. Mixie stood and listened to the wolves talk to each other across the dark, and her expression was something that had no category in the Galactic Academy's standard emotional index. It was not fear. It was not wonder exactly. It was the specific feeling of standing at the edge of something vast and old and real, something that existed completely independently of you and your feelings about it, something that did not need your presence or your approval or your understanding, but that you were, somehow, extraordinarily lucky to be standing close to. She took a breath. The wolves called again. She turned around and walked up the shuttle ramp. Korvac's final entry in the Earth, a working theory document written as the shuttle lifted off and the lights of the park disappeared below them into the dark and green of the continent, was brief. It read, Earth is classified as a death world because it meets every objective criteria for a planet on which complex life should not thrive. The atmosphere is highly oxidative. The biology is competitive to a degree that should preclude cooperative civilization. The climate is variable and frequently lethal. The native fauna occupies every ecological niche with aggressive and often disproportionate effectiveness. The flora has independently developed chemical and physical weapons. Even the smallest organisms on the planet have survival adaptations that exceed those of species from comparatively safe environments. And yet, the dominant species of this planet did not merely survive all of this. They built languages to describe it and art to honor it and sciences to understand it. And one single solitary afternoon I watched one of them offer snacks to a being from another star system in the middle of a forest with wolves in it, with the same comfortable ease that I would use to pass a datapad across a desk. Earth is not a death world because it kills things. Everything kills things. Earth is a death world because it produces beings who have looked at everything that kills things for 4 billion years and decided, on balance, that it is a good day out. I do not know whether to be afraid of them. I think I am mostly glad they exist. End of field report. Professor Vorn, if you are reading this, I still think the pre-excursion safety briefing should be longer. I am submitting this opinion in writing, formally, for the 12th time apparently. He closed the document. He looked out the viewport at Earth, shrinking now, blue and green and wrapped in its white clouds, beautiful and lethal and completely indifferent to anyone's opinion of it. He thought about the snake that rattled before it struck. He thought about the bear that walked away. He thought about Fen saying, without any drama at all, that she would rather run into the bear. He thought about the wolves calling to each other in the dark across the distance the way beings do when they want each other to know that they are there, that they are near, that everything for now is all right. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in the trip he slept.